There comes a moment in every soul's journey when it must decide whether it will continue dimming itself for acceptance or finally risk being fully seen. We all carry within us a light, a vital force, a core truth, a radiance that is uniquely ours, yet for much of our lives, that light flickers beneath layers of fear, shame, and the desire to belong. We trade authenticity for approval, dim our voices to fit into spaces never meant to contain us, and wonder why we feel unseen, misunderstood, or even used. But light that is hidden too long begins to atrophy, and eventually the soul rebels. The body breaks down, the spirit becomes restless, the mind begins to question. These are not signs of failure. They are the quiet whispers of your inner self, asking to be reclaimed. When you begin to listen, truly listen, not just to the noise of your mind, but to the silence beneath it, you discover something astonishing. Your light has always been there, waiting, enduring, whole. This light is not about being radiant in the eyes of others. It is about being congruent within yourself. It is what emerges when you stop lying to yourself, when you stop pretending to be less than you are, when you reclaim the parts of yourself you exiled to be accepted. And this reclamation is no easy task. It requires shadow work, facing the very parts of you that you've been taught to hide. Your anger, your fear, your envy, your desire, your ambition, your sadness, your truth. But here's the paradox. When you integrate what you once rejected, your light does not become darker, it becomes stronger, it becomes invincible, because it is no longer dependent on the approval of others. It is no longer fragile, no longer rooted in performance or validation. It becomes a steady flame, one that warms you from within and gently burns away anything that no longer aligns with your soul's integrity. And this invincibility has a powerful side effect. It changes the field around you. You begin to attract only those who can stand in the presence of such clarity, not because you have pushed others away, but because the vibration of your presence becomes so rooted in truth that only those who respect and honor that truth feel resonance. Others may fall away, not because you are unkind, but because your light exposes what they are not ready to see in themselves. You will notice the change in relationships. The conversations you entertain become more honest. The emotional games that once ensnared you lose their power. You are no longer drawn to fix others to feel worthy. You do not chase what isn't meant for you. Instead, you become magnetic, not in a way that seeks to impress, but in a way that quietly affirms, "This is who I am, and I will not abandon myself to be loved." You begin to honor your time, your energy, your vision. You say no with grace, and yes with conviction. You listen more deeply, not to respond, but to understand. And in doing so, you create space for others to do the same. Your light gives them permission to honor their own. This is the transformative power of self-possession. It doesn't control, it liberates. And what of the world? The world reflects your state of being. When your light is unstable, you attract instability. When it is wounded, you attract triggers. But when it is whole, you attract recognition. Not the shallow kind, but the kind that sees into you and says, "Yes, I see you, and I honor you." Your purpose becomes clearer, not because someone gives it to you, but because your own inner compass begins to work again. You stop asking for directions and begin walking the path that feels aligned, even when uncertain, even when alone, Because you know what is for you cannot miss you, and what leaves you was never meant to walk with you into your becoming. Let us be clear. This light is not ego. It is not arrogance. It is not superiority. It is humility, grounded in self-awareness. It is the knowing that you are both flawed and worthy, both wounded and powerful. It is the ability to hold paradox, to walk with shadows and still choose love. Love that begins with the self and ripples outward. When your light becomes invincible, life becomes less about proving and more about embodying, less about being accepted and more about being free. And in that freedom, you will find peace. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. And that change will echo in everything you touch, everyone you meet, and everything you create. So the question is not, how do I make people honor me? The question is, how do I honor myself so fully that only those who can do the same remain? That is the true path of sovereignty. That is the quiet revolution. That is the light that never dims. And once it's lit, truly lit, it cannot be extinguished, only seen, only felt, only honored. The concept of light in the human psyche is often misunderstood. It is commonly associated with happiness, optimism, or external success. But in its truest form, the light is none of these. It is not a mask worn to impress, nor a false positivity used to suppress discomfort. Rather, it is the radiance of an integrated self, the expression of a person who has confronted and made peace with the entirety of their inner world. This light does not blind, it illuminates, and its source lies not in superficial brightness, but in profound inner clarity. To understand this light, we must first recognize the structure of the self. Human consciousness is not a flat, uniform experience. It is layered, fragmented, and complex. We operate on many levels, some known, some unconscious, some aspirational, and others wounded. The ego, the part of us that navigates the outer world, is only a fragment of the whole self. Beneath it lies the unconscious, where reside the memories, instincts, fears, and desires that we either repress or have never been aware of. In this deeper realm lives the shadow, the disowned parts of the psyche, often judged, hidden, or feared. The process of psychological development is not about eliminating the shadow or pretending that only light exists within us. In fact, the more we deny the shadow, the more power it gains. It seeps into our behaviors, relationships, and decisions, often unconsciously guiding us toward repeated patterns of sabotage, fear, and projection. The path to becoming truly luminous, truly radiant, is found in the exact opposite direction. It requires a descent into the darker parts of the self with curiosity rather than judgment. It is in that encounter with the shadow that our authentic light is born. True light arises not from rejecting pain, but from integrating it. When we confront what we once feared within ourselves, we reclaim energy that was bound in shame, guilt, or denial. We begin to feel more whole, more grounded, more alive. The individual who has met their sorrow, examined their rage, acknowledged their longing, and mourned their loss is no longer fragmented. They become coherent. Their energy becomes concentrated, stable, and clear. This inner coherence is what shines. It is the unshakable sense of self that comes from knowing one's complexity without needing to defend it. This light is not performative. It is not concerned with validation or approval. It does not change with the environment or mold itself to fit expectations. It exists because the person who carries it has stopped betraying themselves in the name of belonging. They have stopped shrinking to avoid judgment or inflating to gain admiration. They have learned to sit with discomfort, to tell the truth, to accept what cannot be changed, and to change what can. This process, though often slow and painful, is transformative. It turns fragmentation into integration and insecurity into presence. And yet this light is not without paradox. The more truly radiant a person becomes, the more invisible they might appear to those who are still deeply unconscious. Not everyone will recognize or value this type of presence. In fact, those still dominated by their own shadow may be threatened by it. This is why the development of inner light also includes the capacity to stand alone. When you no longer seek others to fill your emptiness, your relationships shift. The ones based on need or illusion begin to dissolve. What remains are the relationships that resonate with the truth of who you are. This is not loneliness, it is alignment. An individual who has integrated their shadow becomes magnetic not because they are trying to attract others, but because they are anchored in something real. Their authenticity becomes a kind of lighthouse, calling forth others who are on a similar journey. This attraction is not based on charm or manipulation, but on resonance. People who value depth, honesty, and wholeness are naturally drawn to those who embody it. In contrast, those who thrive on illusion or unconsciousness find no entry point. The invincibility of the light does not lie in defense. It lies in transparency. There is nothing to hide, and therefore nothing to attack. This is why the idea of invincible light is so powerful. It cannot be dimmed by rejection, because it does not rely on approval. It cannot be corrupted by ego, because it has grown through the dismantling of ego. And it cannot be stolen or replicated, because it is the product of an inner journey that is entirely one's own. Each person's light is unique, shaped by their particular history, wounds, and insight. And once it begins to shine, it becomes a compass, not only guiding the individual forward, but subtly shaping the environment around them. To cultivate this light, one must be willing to engage in the ongoing work of self-awareness. It is not a one-time event, but a lifelong process. It requires moments of silence, of introspection, of listening to the whispers of the psyche rather than the noise of the world. It asks us to slow down, to feel deeply, and to examine the stories we tell ourselves. It invites us to face the parts we would rather avoid, the envy, the fear, the resentment, and ask what truth they carry. And it rewards us not with perfection, but with authenticity. In the end, the light you carry is not something you acquire, it is something you uncover. It has always been within you, waiting for you to turn inward and remove the layers of fear, denial, and pretense that have obscured it. When you do, something remarkable happens. You stop chasing connection and start embodying it. You stop fearing rejection and begin honoring your own truth. And most importantly, you begin to attract not just people, but experiences that align with your most integrated self. The experience of being seen, truly seen, is rare. Often we move through life encountering others not as they are, but as projections of our own expectations, wounds, and fears. Similarly, we are often perceived through the distorted filters of others, reduced to roles, ideas, or emotional mirrors. But something profound happens when a person develops psychological boundaries rooted in self-acknowledge. These boundaries are not walls that separate, but filters that clarify. They do not isolate, they purify the emotional field, allowing only what is in resonance with the authentic self to remain. And this phenomenon transforms the nature of attraction itself. Psychological boundaries are not merely about saying no or enforcing limits, although those are external expressions. At their core, boundaries are the unconscious signals we emit based on how we perceive ourselves and what we believe we deserve. If we carry unresolved shame, unworthiness, or fear of abandonment, we unconsciously invite others who echo these themes. This is not a moral failing. It is a natural psychological law. We seek familiarity even if it harms us, because the psyche gravitates toward what feels internally coherent, not necessarily what is externally healthy. However, when a person undergoes the work of introspection and integration, their internal landscape changes. They no longer unconsciously seek what affirms their wounding. Instead, they begin to resonate with clarity, self-trust, and emotional alignment. This shift in internal structure changes the nature of interpersonal magnetism. Attraction is no longer rooted in lack, fantasy, or dependency, but in authenticity, shared values, and mutual respect. The psyche, now free of compulsive repetition, opens to relationships that are reciprocal, rather than reenactments of unresolved pain. At a biological level, humans are wired to sense emotional congruence. We may not always have the language for it, but we feel it. We are drawn to people whose nervous systems signal coherence and self-possession. Likewise, we feel repelled, though sometimes confused, by those whose energy is erratic, enmeshed, or manipulative. This is why psychological boundaries, even when invisible, have such a profound effect. They alter the field of perception. When a person is internally clear, they communicate that clarity through tone, posture, eye contact, and presence. Their very being says, "I know who I am. I know what I am available for. I am not here to be consumed, rescued, or dominated." People who live from this place tend to attract those who honor them, not because they are seeking validation, but because they no longer need to abandon themselves to receive connection. Their presence acts as a kind of psychological litmus test. Those who are rooted in manipulation or emotional chaos find no purchase. They cannot hook into drama, guilt, or confusion because the person before them offers no unconscious contract to engage. The dance of dysfunction is interrupted before it begins. Instead, relationships are built from a space of mutual presence and shared accountability. What's fascinating is that this form of attraction is not always loud or glamorous. It doesn't sparkle in the conventional way. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or emotional intensity. Rather, it feels calm, it feels safe, it feels honest. And this is what makes it sustainable. When two people meet with self-awareness and intact psychological boundaries, they do not consume each other. They do not become addicted to roles. Instead, they mirror one another's wholeness. The relationship becomes a space not for escape, but for expansion. This does not mean that conflict disappears or that every relationship becomes perfect. Rather, it means that conflict is no longer a battlefield of unconscious wounds, but a space for conscious growth. Boundaries allow for honest dialogue, clear expectations, and mutual repair. There is room for individuality, difference, and even disagreement, because the foundation is secure. The attraction that exists in such relationships is not brittle or needy. It is robust, flexible, and evolving. It breathes, because it is not built on illusion. Another crucial aspect of healthy psychological boundaries is the ability to discern. When your inner light becomes steady, rooted in truth rather than performance, you naturally begin to distinguish between those who value you for who you are and those who are drawn to what they can extract. This discernment is not cynical, it is wise. It does not seek to judge others, but to protect your inner space. You begin to realize that not everyone deserves access to your energy, time, or emotions. And this realization is not bitter, it is liberating. In fact, one of the signs that your light has become invincible is the comfort you feel in releasing what no longer serves you. You stop chasing, proving, or fixing. You no longer overextend to maintain connection, because you understand that love, in its highest form, cannot be forced. You trust that what is aligned will remain, and what is not will fade, not as a punishment, but as a natural consequence of resonance. And in this trust you find peace. This peace becomes magnetic. It is not the kind of magnetism that pulls with desperation, but one that gently draws in what mirrors your inner state. Relationships formed in this space often unfold slowly, organically, without drama. There is mutual curiosity, not demand. There is emotional generosity, not sacrifice. There is depth, not pretense. And most importantly, there is the shared understanding that connection is a meeting of sovereign souls, not the fusion of incomplete selves. When your psychological boundaries are intact and your light is stable, your very presence becomes a form of communication. You no longer need to explain yourself endlessly, because your energy speaks clearly. You no longer fear rejection, because you no longer reject yourself. And you no longer mistake attention for intimacy, because you have learned to value the quiet dignity of being honored over the noise of being pursued. In a world that often confuses availability with worth and attachment with love, this clarity is revolutionary. It changes not only how you relate to others, but how others relate to themselves in your presence. Your boundaries model what is possible. Your self-respect invites others to meet you in their own truth, and your invincible light, born of integration, becomes a beacon not of superiority, but of shared humanity. You attract what you are ready for. And when your light is rooted in authenticity, what you attract is not applause, but alignment. Not quantity, but quality. Not distraction, but depth. And this, above all, is the gift of becoming psychologically whole. Invincibility is a word often misunderstood. It is easily mistaken for force, control, or emotional armor. We imagine the invincible self as someone who feels no pain, who cannot be broken, who walks through life untouched by disappointment or betrayal. But in truth, invincibility is not the absence of vulnerability. It is the profound strength that arises from embracing it. It is not the denial of wounds, but the wisdom learned through healing them. This kind of inner power is subtle, quiet, and steady. It does not dominate, it simply stands unshaken. And the source of this strength is always self-acknowledged. To know oneself is to become impervious to manipulation, not because one becomes closed, but because one is clear. When you know your patterns, your fears, your desires, and your needs, you can no longer be seduced by illusions that once held power over you. You no longer seek approval from people who withhold it, nor do you chase validation in places that consistently deny your worth. The invincible self does not need to prove, impress, or persuade. It is not reactive, it is responsive. It does not exist in opposition to others, but in congruence with itself. There is a quiet authority that comes with self-acknowledge. It does not arise from ego or superiority, but from the calm certainty that one's value is not dependent on being chosen, liked, or understood by all. This certainty creates a kind of internal sanctuary. The opinions, projections, and behaviors of others may enter your field, but they do not define you. You are no longer shaped by external forces. You become an autonomous center of meaning and truth. This is the essence of invincibility. People often imagine that strength is about never falling apart. But the truly strong are those who have allowed themselves to break open and then gently, intentionally put themselves back together. They have met the chaos within without flinching. They have sat with the parts of themselves that others rejected or shamed. They have asked difficult questions and stayed with the discomfort long enough to receive authentic answers. And through this inner labor, they have forged something unshakable, a relationship with themselves that no one else can govern. This relationship with self becomes a compass. It guides decisions, clarifies boundaries, and filters relationships. It is not rigid but discerning. It does not need to control outcomes because it trusts in the process of becoming. People who embody this kind of inner strength often radiate an unmistakable presence. They do not need to raise their voice to be heard. Their silence carries weight. Their authenticity is disarming. They do not hide behind masks, and in doing so, they give others permission to remove their own. What's critical to understand is that this form of strength is not accidental. It is cultivated through deep psychological work. One must be willing to question inherited beliefs, outdated roles, and internalized voices that no longer serve. This process is rarely comfortable, and it is often lonely. But it is through this solitude that one discovers the self, not the ideal self, not the performing self, but the essential self, the one that remains when everything external falls away. From this place, invincibility emerges not as defense, but as openness without fear. One becomes open to love, open to change, open to truth, even when it hurts. Because the fear of pain no longer rules the psyche, freedom is found in the ability to feel fully without being consumed. The self no longer fractures under pressure because it no longer relies on external structures to remain whole. It has become its own foundation. Relationships inevitably change in response to this inner transformation. When a person is no longer willing to self-abandon for the sake of connection, only relationships built on mutual respect survive. Manipulative dynamics fall away, not through conflict, but through irrelevance. People who relied on your insecurity to control or extract from you will find no anchor, no entry point. Their familiar patterns fail to evoke the expected responses, and in this way, the once powerful hold of dysfunctional dynamics dissolves. Painfulness. This does not mean life becomes conflict-free or that painful moments vanish, but it means those moments no longer dismantle you. You remain grounded, even in uncertainty. You hold space for others without losing yourself. You navigate the world from a place of truth, not performance. And this steadiness is felt by others. It commands respect, not because it demands it, but because it embodies it. To become invincible in this way is to live without masks, to know that you can survive rejection, disappointment, even heartbreak, and still choose integrity over pretense. It is to stop shrinking for the comfort of others. It is to honor your own needs without apology. And it is to realize that you are no longer for everyone, because you are finally for yourself. In a world that often rewards conformity and performance, this kind of inner alignment is rare, but it is profoundly magnetic. Those who recognize it will be drawn to it, not to use or consume, but to meet it with equal depth. Because when you stand fully in your truth, you attract others who are doing the same. You no longer enter into relationships hoping to be completed. You enter as someone already whole, seeking not fusion, but resonance. This is the heart of what it means to be invincible. It is not about being untouched by life's hardships. It is about being unmoved by anything that asks you to betray yourself. It is about choosing truth over comfort, integrity over approval, and depth over ease. And it is about remembering, in every moment of challenge or temptation, that your greatest strength is not your armor, but your unwavering commitment to your own soul. The outer world is not separate from the inner world, it is its mirror. Every perception, interaction, and emotional reaction we experience is filtered through the lens of our own consciousness. What we see out there is often a projection of what lives within. This idea is not metaphorical, it is psychological. The mind does not simply receive reality, it shapes it. Our thoughts, expectations, wounds, and beliefs become the blueprint through which we organize and interpret our surroundings. Therefore, when our inner light becomes clear, steady, and invincible, our external world inevitably transforms in response. To understand this, we must begin with the concept of projection. Projection occurs when we unconsciously assign aspects of ourselves, often parts we deny, fear, or undervalue, onto others. For example, a person who has not yet embraced their own assertiveness might consistently encounter others they perceive as too aggressive. Someone who suppresses their sadness may find themselves irritated by others who express emotional vulnerability. These outer reactions are not random. They are the psyche's way of calling attention to what has not yet been integrated within. When we live in a state of inner fragmentation, where parts of ourselves are suppressed, ignored, or rejected, our perception becomes distorted. We see threats where there are none. We seek validation from people who can never offer it. We become attracted to relationships that recreate our childhood wounds because the unconscious is always seeking resolution, even at the cost of our peace. This is how the world mirrors the soul. It gives us exactly the circumstances we need to become aware of our inner landscape, even if that awareness is initially painful. However, when we begin the work of self-integration, when we confront our shadows, heal our emotional wounds, and honor the truth of our being, the lens through which we view the world becomes clearer. We are no longer seeing reality through the fog of unprocessed pain or inherited belief systems. Instead, we are seeing through the clarity of self-awareness. This shift within inevitably causes a shift without. People often say, "Everything started to change when I changed." This is not magical thinking, it is the natural consequence of inner transformation. As we change what we tolerate, what we pursue, and how we respond, the dynamics of our life begin to shift. Toxic relationships fade because we no longer resonate with them. New opportunities arise because we are now aligned with our authentic desires rather than our survival patterns. Even the way people treat us begins to evolve, not because they have changed, but because we no longer show up in ways that invite disrespect, codependency, or self-abandonment. This is why cultivating inner light is so powerful. It is not about becoming perfect or eternally positive. Rather, it is about becoming congruent, where our thoughts, emotions, and actions align with our truth. Congruence creates coherence, and coherence emits a kind of frequency that others can sense, even if they cannot name it. It is this frequency that repels those who seek control, manipulation, or projection, and instead draws those who value authenticity, mutual growth, and emotional responsibility. The invincible light does not demand attention. It attracts it. It does not beg for love. It embodies it. And this embodiment serves as a kind of filter. Only those capable of honoring your truth will feel comfortable in your presence. Others may feel discomfort, not because you are unkind or unapproachable, but because your very existence calls forth their unacknowledged shadow. And not everyone is ready for that. Therefore, as your light strengthens, your circle may shrink, but what remains becomes a sanctuary of resonance, rather than a battlefield of unmet needs. This phenomenon extends beyond personal relationships. It affects your career, your creative work, your daily experiences. The more in alignment you are with your inner truth, the more the outer world reflects opportunities and people that match that energy. Synchronicity becomes more frequent, not because the universe is conspiring in your favor in some mystical way, but because your unconscious and conscious minds are now working in harmony, sending clear signals about what you are ready to receive and what you will no longer accept. There is immense peace in recognizing that you do not need to chase anything, not success, not love, not approval. When your inner world is whole, your outer world begins to respond accordingly. What is meant for you recognizes you by your energy, not your effort. It is drawn to the clarity of your presence, the honesty of your boundaries, and the radiance of your inner coherence. This does not mean life becomes effortless or that challenges disappear, but it means you are no longer at war with yourself, and that changes everything. To live in such a state is to become sovereign. Sovereignty is not dominance, it is self-possession. It is the capacity to remain rooted in your truth regardless of external noise. And from that rooted place, you can engage with the world not as someone who needs it to define you, but as someone who brings definition to it through conscious participation. You become a co-creator of your experience, not a passive receiver of fate. This is what it means when we say, the world mirrors the soul. Your inner light, when cultivated with courage, honesty, and love, becomes the tuning fork for your entire reality. It reshapes what you notice, what you attract, and what you allow. It doesn't just change how others see you. It changes who you are in the seeing. The light you nurture within yourself becomes the path, the protection, and the purpose that carries you forward. And so the most profound work we can do is not to fix the outer world, but to illuminate our inner one. When we make the unconscious conscious, when we love what we once feared, and when we choose wholeness over perfection, we begin to glow from the inside out. That glow becomes unmistakable, and the people, experiences, and opportunities that meet you from that moment onward will not be those that diminish your light, but those who honor it, because they have found the courage to honor their own. When you cultivate a light within that is grounded not in performance, but in truth, you no longer seek the world's permission to exist. You become your own anchor, steady, luminous, and quietly unshakable. This inner radiance does not arise from perfection, but from integration. It is the glow of someone who has walked into their darkness and emerged not with fear, but with understanding. And when that light becomes invincible, born from self-acknowledge, shadow work, and emotional clarity, it naturally becomes selective, not by force, but by nature. Those who cannot honor such light will drift away, not out of rejection, but because they were never aligned with your essence. And those who remain or arrive will do so with presence, respect, and resonance. The world always reflects back to us the energy we carry within, so make your light invincible, not by shielding it, but by illuminating it with honesty. The more you choose to be whole rather than liked, authentic rather than approved, the more your reality aligns with those who truly see you, not for what you can offer, but for who you are. That is the quiet power of inner truth, and that is the path of meaningful connection, creative purpose, and soul-deep peace.